What is going on, everyone? Week 2 recap here for GR Weekly. I am Matt McCarthy, your host for today. And let me tell you, I said all week that I hated the 1 p.m. games. I thought they were bad. I thought it was going to be slow going for the start of the slate. I did not expect 7,000 injuries and just terrible football and a lot of low fantasy scores. And man, it was a good thing for that Sunday night football game. A few good 4 p.m. games that were pretty excellent. Otherwise, this was not a week that I was very happy kind of going into it. It looked like there was going to be just poor matchups over the place, and that's what happened. We don't have a lot of time to waste because we got 14 games to go over today in our week 2 recap. Going to be starting off here with the Cincinnati Bengals versus Chicago Bears. Chicago wins this one 20-17, starting over on the Cincinnati side. Man, tell you, late into the third and fourth quarter, you had 4 straight drives of just, 10 total plays equaled 4 turnovers going the way of Chicago. Unfortunately, Chicago produced no offensive touchdowns from those turnovers. But with Joe Burrow just playing catch with that Chicago defense, not a lot of offense was able to be happening on the Cincinnati side. A lot of offense that did not happen, unfortunately, with the Chicago side as well, because that 2017 only led to a pick 6 and a couple of field goals. So no real big offensive production came that way. The one big thing going into the game was, what was the target share going to look like once they open up the passing game? Very low passing totals in week 1. Here in week 2, with Burrow completing, almost as many passes to the opposing team than it is, only 30 pass attempts in the game. You got T. Higgins here with a 33% target share, followed by Boyd's 30%. Chase's day saved by a long touchdown score. Higgins is going to stay the lead option for me in this receiver trio. With Boyd and Chase can be mixing in as flex receivers. If Chase continues to have deep scores, though, he'd be more valuable than Boyd, but that's just to kind of be seen as to what's going to really happen with them going forward. The one play, the real bright spot for them at least, is Joe Mixon. I think Joe Mixon for me is going to be a top 12 running back going forward. This is going to be a situation where we wanted to see exactly what the workload is going to be, and they're giving him the lion's share. No other player actually even had a carry in this game for Cincinnati outside of Joe Mixon's 20. And if we're going to have a situation where a running back is going to have just confirmed easy work week in, week out, no matter what at least the matchup's going to at least be affecting it on at least that regard, when you don't have touches being stolen by your own team, that's when we can say, hey, if he does have a good matchup, Chicago, I respect it somewhat, but I thought there was going to be a down sort of defensive game. Also, a lot of this game got ruined by just real awkward stretch of plays there from Burrow turning it over. But Mixon, if he's going to have such a big workload in a losing effort, that's something to at least be very hopeful for when it does go to his favor. Currently, I think for him, I'm going to be ranking him ahead of these sort of guys. Najee Harris, Antonio Gibson, DeAndre Swift, possibly even Jonathan Taylor, who I have a good amount of concern about, especially around the goal line. Those are guys I think Mixon could currently be ranked over. So between 7 to 9 at the very least is where I think he should probably slot in for you right now in the top 12, especially for full PPR, which we talked about. Moving to Chicago, a top 12 guy I thought would be for this week was going to be David Montgomery. Again, the issue is a lot of the effort was kind of in for naught because we did not get a good amount of scoring opportunities because of how this game played out. Just like Mixon, 20 carries for him, does have received 4 targets through the air. I'm disappointed, but a lot of people did have him as a very good play this week. So whether that's, to stay or to go, and, here or there, all that sort of stuff. But the first injury we're going to talk about for the day on the top of, I have a list here from NFL.com, the NFL staff writing. There's like an injury, at least like per team. There's like 17 guys who got hurt yesterday in varying in important ways. But Andy Dalton here, injured his knee in the game. Matt Nagy, though, does come out and say immediately that if he is healthy, he is the starter. Justin Fields, we did get to see in some limited action, did not impress in any sort of facet. 6-13 through the air, throws an interception, sacked twice, 10 for 31 on the ground. Not particularly any sort of ground earth-shattering sort of numbers out of him. But this was a total wash. Just became a non-competitive nature of the game for most of it, and then it started going in Chicago's favor in that second half, and everything started getting sort of wonky. With Chicago playing intense catch-up, the Chicago defense putting them in a favorable spot. With the 23 touches, amazing, cool stuff. But through the air, I'm not going to really give too much concern over for Robinson. Was targeted on the first drive, first score, does not see another target until the third quarter, which is fine. I'm not overreacting too much to him. Cole Kmet, I was a little surprised, only saw one target after 7 in week 1. I've not been a Cole Kmet guy. To be seen, though, if Fields starts in the game, what's going to be sort of working out in terms of how Fields is targeting these players. But at the very least, he's not targeting Cole Kmet. So something to really be mindful of, and not a player that we're kind of looking at as a top 12 option. I at least did not consider him a top 12 option in week 2. Moving on, we got the Houston Texans and the Cleveland Browns. This was a kind of a head scratcher because I thought this was going to be a layup for Cleveland. Coming off that tough loss to Kansas City in week 1, I thought this was a big get-right game for them, and we had some immediate injuries to talk about this on both sides of the ball. We're going to start with the Houston Texans side, though. Houston, Tyrod Taylor suffers a hamstring injury after a rushing touchdown first, second quarter of the game. Was able to go on for a little while, but then he was trying to roll out to his left, had to throw the ball into the stands, was unable to continue in the game. Possible IR stint coming up for him. Nico Collins was injured in this game. Danny Amendola was injured in this game, all ruled out. These are not particularly big fantasy producers, and Collins and Amendola, but Tyrod Taylor has looked good through 2 games. And it was looking like at the one very least thing he could do is throw the ball to Brandon Cooks. Because Brandon Cooks is really going to be the only consistent fantasy producer I can see for this team, the guy you're going to be wanting to start. 14 targets in this game. No one sees more than 2. For the total, if he's going to see so much of a team's total 19 attempts, he's going to back his way into wide receiver 2 type production. Cooks currently one of 10 players with 20 or more targets, but along with guys like Mike Williams, Deebo Samuel, Marvin Jones, these are like late round sort of darling picks that currently all have either 200 yards receiving along with those targets or multiple scores. So big things out of those 4 guys who got pretty late in drafts and able to be put into your flex or wide receiver 2 spots. Currently, Marvin Jones favored out of the Jacksonville trio. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk is completely into doghouse, and no one really knows what's going on there. Mike Williams is pretty on par with production that Keenan Allen has been producing. And like I said, right here, Brandon Cooks, he is the only guy I want to trust out of the Houston Texans. With David Johnson sees a little bit of receiving work. Phillip Lindsey scores. Mark Ingram leads the way with 14 carries, 41 yards. If they're going to split up 25 carries to these 3 backs, they're going to split up 5 targets to these 3 backs. I don't want to really roster any of them. David Johnson, I'm still holding on to at the very least. I think he's the best receiver of this group, but I don't think that's going to matter too much unless they really start keying in on exactly one guy. And they haven't done that outside of Mark Ingram in the rushing attack. But that's not particularly something that is valuable for fantasy if he's not getting a good amount of rushing yards and scoring on top of that. So I don't think any 3 of the Houston Texans running backs are really required rosters in 10 or 12 team leagues. Not if you're looking toward the waiver wire, those are some of the few guys I think you can at least be looking at to drop here in week 2. Over on the Cleveland Browns side, though, who did win this game 31-21, if I even said that. But Cleveland, one big thing was going to be Odell Beckham Jr. He was not active for this game. And over on the Houston side, it was the running back infusion. We just said none of them. But for Cleveland, very frustrating game. Mayfield hurt early, trying to tackle an interception he made. Injured his arm, did come back into the game. To be seen if there's anything more from it. They're kind of downplaying that's anything severe. It's good for us. Landry leaves early in the first quarter. That was a player I was talking up quite a bit, even on the Off the Grid show here on the Gridiron Ratings channel, that I felt he was a trap sort of play this week. Now, this is completely different. This is an injury situation. This is not anything I'm going to be holding against him or holding against fantasy managers for starting this week. I was just kind of holding against it. I didn't think he was a top 36 type option in week 2. Obviously does not finish as such as he leaves the game quite early. But of the 3 Cleveland touchdowns, on top of injuries yesterday, it was also a big matter of weird vulture touchdown thief sort of situations going on. Baker Mayfield with a keeper rushing touchdown. Demetric Felton, who I just found out what his name was yesterday. Thankfully, Nick Chubb does score 11 carries for 95 yards. 8 of his 11 went for 5 or more yards on the ground. One day he will be let loose and run all over, and he will be the best running back in the NFL. Derrick Henry's going to go kicking and screaming, though, I think, in a little bit on that regard. We'll get to that game later. Otherwise, this game went heavily to what I thought the script was going to be. Heavy dose of Chubb, heavy dose of Kareem Hunt. The defense did flounder somewhat, allowing especially greater than 50% on third down conversions for Houston when the offense was basically just Brandon Cooks. When Odell Beckham Jr. is active once again, it's going to be, for me, Odell plus the running backs and the defense are the only real players I'm going to be saying should be starting options for you in a normal 12-team, one-quarterback league. A little bit of a catch-up game here. New England Patriots versus New York Jets. New England wins this game pretty handily, 25-6. One big thing over on the New England side was after that 100-yard rush performance week 1 for Damien Harris, was it a flash in the pan or something that's going to be a real legit sort of situation for him? He fumbles late in week 1. It kind of costs New England the game, but he looked extremely well in that one player where he broke like 17 tackles. It took the entire New York Jets to try and take him down, and he still scores. New England defense, I want to talk about them real quick. Teams that have allowed fewer than 21 points through 2 weeks, there's currently 5 of them. The Los Angeles Chargers, the New England Patriots, the Denver Broncos, the Carolina Panthers, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Something to talk about with both the New England defense, who picked off Willison on 3 of his first 5 attempts in this game. This was a complete non-factor game from the get-go. Wilson currently looks like the guy we're going to be trying to stream defenses against upcoming. We have matchups against, the Falcons and the Titans to be seeing if those defenses are even worth streaming, but we'll just go right into that New York side. Wilson, 10 sacks and 5 picks through 2 weeks. That is not good, especially since Sam Darnold is doing some pretty excellent stuff down there in Carolina. There is no one I find startable next week versus Denver. Corey Davis is currently not on, is a little bit on the back burner. Because I had to look this up, and I was very so I use StatHead for some of my deeper sort of statistical outlooks. And Braxton Berrios, who saw 11 targets in this game, is currently the 5th most targets in the NFL. And unless there's some players missing from that chart, that is extremely something to me. Corey Davis, 2 receptions for 8 yards in this game. There is no one I want to start on this team. Michael Carter does lead this running back backfield in week 2 with him having 11 carries, 59 yards, and 2 receptions for 29. That's still really not enough against a Denver Broncos defense that I find to be playing some very excellent football through 2 weeks. Not particularly something that I want to invest in is any Jets right now. No, thank you. So moving on. Los Angeles Rams versus the Indianapolis Colts. LA wins this game 27-24. Starting on the Los Angeles side. Another injury we got to talk about. Darrell Henderson injures his ribs. Currently have no time frame on severity or whether or not he's going to be missing some weeks. Not any news I can see out of this recording. So currently, Sony Michelle, he did run pretty well in relief for Henderson. 4.6 yards per attempt. I don't think it's going to thrust him into being a confirmed top 24 running back. It's going to be, I think, a per game basis. I'm going to look up real quick exactly who they are playing next week. Rams got to take on Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, nope, we don't have to start Sony Michelle. That's good for us. So, don't have to think about him being pushed into the lineup. So, cool. Good for us. Main story is definitely Stafford and Cooper Kupp. Kupp currently accounts for 45% of Stafford's total yards through 2 weeks. Over on the other side, Robert Woods counting for 15%, just to have those numbers available. For some reason, Cooper Kupp keeps getting completely uncovered and running wild. And if he just keeps getting behind opposing defenses or taking a part of just picking apart zone, which I appeared to see that he did so on the 2 touchdowns he did score, he is a wide receiver 1. Now, Woods is not exactly a bad start. 9 targets in this game to Kupp's 11. But Kupp has just really been shown that he is the number 1 target on this team. He's the number 1 target and an offense that's going to be very good producing fantasy points through the air. And if Kupp is going to continue to play like this, he is a wide receiver one. He is a top 12 option. I will be ranking him as such. I still had faith that Woods, as my preseason preference of these two, was going to be bouncing back and away in week 2 here. So I did want to go push the needle too far one way or another after 1 week. But no, it is confirmed. It is Cooper Kupp. So as of right now, Kupp over Woods, undeniably for sure. Like I said, this Tampa Bay game, that is an early candidate for sure for game of the week in week 3. I do like that matchup for this LA Rams passing attack. Or on to the Indianapolis Colts. So another injury. That's all we got today. Carson Wentz sprained both of his ankles in this game. So Jacob Eason isn't currently in line to start week 3. We have to get some more information about what the timetable is going to be for Carson Wentz. But one big thing going into the game was definitely, can we have one receiver turn out to be reliable? And it was a very bad timing for Wentz to have these injuries, because both Pittman, the 123 8-reception performance, and Zach Pascal, who's currently the second leading scorer in the NFL, only behind Rob Gronkowski's 4 touchdowns, 2 receivers that we can currently say, hey, I think we can kind of get ourselves behind these players to be actual flex or higher sort of receiver options for us. But man, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Eason under center, if that is in fact what the Indianapolis Colts are going to be doing. Hines picks up only 3 touches in his 25 snaps. Now, everything, again, does change if Wentz is out, but that is a real point of worry. And the real big point of worry is actually Jonathan Taylor. A little bit of bearing the lead here. But Jonathan Taylor sees 5 carries in week 2 from the 3-yard line or closer. And he completely accrues just -1 total rushing yards on those 5 attempts, does not score. If you add on the 2 he had from week 1 from the 2-yard line or closer, Jonathan Taylor currently has 7 carries for 0 total yards and no scores from within opponent's 5-yard line or closer in 2 weeks. You only get so many chances per season to get this close to your opponent's end zone and try and push one in. 7 attempts and he does not find the end zone. That is a point of worry. Does have Tennessee next on the schedule. Let's see if he can get right in that regard. But I am starting to worry about Jonathan Taylor. If they're going to give goal line carries away for him to Marlon Mack or to Nyheim Hines, because so far he has been completely unsuccessful at entering the opponent's end zone for a touchdown. Point of notice for sure. Another bad 1 p.m. game here. Buffalo versus Miami, the only shutout of the day. Buffalo wins 35-0. Starting on the Buffalo side, Allen has not particularly been very sharp over 2 weeks, averaging 225 passing yards, 3 scores between the two, and a 56% pass completion percentage. Yeah. On paper, they have been particularly not super appealing matchups between Pittsburgh and Miami. But this is in no way indicative of what you particularly want out of a player like Josh Allen, a preseason consensus top, let's say 3 quarterback, a guy who lit the absolute world on fire last year in 2020. Does get a good amount of rushing work still. I think he has like over 30 yards in both games. That's very nice for his floor. Does get stopped at the 1-yard line in a very weird technicality that if you're diving like a quarterback like that, it's where you kind of give yourself up. So he does get a touchdown taken off the board. I have a few leagues where I would have preferred that to be a score, but so it is. That's just kind of how things worked out yesterday. But with Washington, Houston, and Kansas City, his next 3 games, at least 2 of those, I'm expecting some pretty good yardage and numbers out of both Josh Allen and possibly the rest of this Buffalo team. Because Stephon Diggs we don't have to talk too much about, but these running backs we for sure do. One big thing was going to be if Zach Moss was inactive again, what would that mean for Devin Singletary? Well, Zach Moss was active. And Zach Moss scored 2 touchdowns in total garbage time. And he has more touchdowns than players like Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. It's just, that's how football goes. He has 10 total touches on the season, and 2 of them are touchdowns. But Devin Singletary was running pretty effectively in this game. Now, no matter of how this looks like when it does transition to being a more competitive game, it's to be understood as to how they're going to spread out. But through 2 games, at least, Josh Allen has no rushing scores, has been a pretty consistent 8 rushing touchdowns or more per season over the last 3 years. If he sees lots of those, what does it mean for Singletary? What does it mean for Moss? As their biggest threat has been Josh Allen getting into the end zone. Now, it's to be said that Zach Moss's touches pretty much primarily came late in the game in the 3rd and 4th quarters. Singletary does look like he is the lead option. And one last note, Gabriel Davis going untargeted in a lopsided game. And he was active. I wanted to make sure he was on the field. He was on the field. He is a drop candidate going into these week 3 waivers. Miami side, unfortunately, with Tua hurt extremely early in this game, it became very non-competitive right from the get-go, with Jacoby Brissett taking over for him. Will Fuller was also away from this game for personal reasons. He is back at the Miami's Dolphins facility, so that's nice to at least see him back in-house with them. I don't know if that means he's going to be playing in week 3 or not, but that is their best, I believe, receiver and should be treated as such. It's currently stated that Tua is on a day-to-day basis with a rib injury. Hope he's good to go. Hope Fuller plays. Like to see this Miami Dolphins at full strength. Not too much really to go on a 200 total yard day like the Miami Dolphins just currently had. We're on to the only game in the 1 o'clock slate that had a 50-point total. Implied total. San Francisco wins this game over the Philadelphia Eagles 17-11. That was the kind of day we had. So starting on the San Francisco side, just a lot more injuries. Elijah Mitchell, hopefully he didn't spend a billion fab bucks on him because, well, he's day-to-day with the shoulder. But JaMychal Hasty has a high ankle sprain. He's going to miss some time. Oh, and Trey Sermon landed extremely scarily on his head and neck. He's currently in the concussion protocol. Undetermined amount of time for him. But that was a very scary flip and fall for him. But currently, Duke Johnson, Lamar Miller, and TJ Yeldon are all being brought in to fill the roster holes that San Francisco currently has. Jeff Wilson is due back in a few weeks, but he's not ready for this sort of work. He's ready to be active and be working for the San Francisco 49ers at all. Not a particularly excellent options. So if Mitchell is the only player really active in that backfield, he's going to get the bulk of the work again. And the pregame sort of talks were that he was going to see the majority of the carries, majority of the work, and that wasn't particularly a lie. 17 carries compared to 5 for Hasty, 1 for Sermon. He got hurt and fumbled on his only touch. But with Mitchell, it's unfortunate he gets stopped at the 1. It's unfortunate they weren't very productive in this game. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are showcasing that they are a strong defense because I had pretty high hopes for San Francisco to do pretty good things coming off of that week 1 big win over the Detroit Lions that turned into a very sloppy, garbage time game. But with Mitchell, at least we can say that maybe if he's healthy enough, there's a confirmed starter for week 3, and it's Mitchell with no sort of hangups at all. I didn't rank him very highly this week. Was in the early, 20, 21, 22. I can't remember the exact number, but I don't think I was pushing him towards being a RB1 sort of start or anything like that. But Kittle disappoints once again, and Deebo Samuel really the only bright spot. As Brandon Ayuk, this is a big make or break week from a week 3. Sunday night football matchup versus the Green Bay Packers. The lights are going to be on the San Francisco team. They are banged up at the running back position. They need these receivers. They need their passing game to really pull out all the stops and get them a win over, hopefully in 20-something minutes, a Green Bay Packers team that is going to do the whole relax thing and go and stomp the Detroit Lions, because I think that'd be pretty good for everyone included if the Green Bay Packers are a good football team. But he does see at least a little bit of an uptick in snaps, 38 this week on offense, 26 in week 1. Is it a injury for Ayuk? Is it the coaching decision? We don't particularly know. I like to think that Brian Ayuk is going to be a top 20 sort of receiver at some point. But right now, Deebo Samuel is one of the best fantasy receivers in football for these past few weeks. So we're just going to have to see how this whole cookie really crumbles. Another Terrible game. New Orleans Saints with the Carolina Panthers. Carolina wins 26-7, starting on the New Orleans side. One big thing was how much of New Orleans from week 1 was a fluke. I don't know, because we didn't really learn anything here, because they only had, I believe, 4 active coaches, because most of the coaching staff was out with COVID. They had 128 total yards. This is one of the worst offensive outputs that a Sean Payton team has ever produced. I don't know if we learned anything. I don't think Alvin Kamara can carry the entire load for this offense. I didn't expect them to also throw for 25% touchdown percentage in week 1 against the Green Bay Packers. We don't know anything about we know nothing about this team. We know nothing about this team. I don't think dropping Marcus Callaway is a good idea. He got the Jair Alexander treatment in week 1. The Carolina Panthers are apparently a good defense. We don't know. I know nothing about the Saints right now. I wouldn't make any bold claims about them at all. If you have Saints and you want to drop them, fine, but then you're going to probably be missing out on some good weeks later on the line. They need Smith, they need Thomas, they need this team at full bore. Very much a team in flux, very much a team that we thought might be a terrible offense going into the year, and right now that's kind of holding true. Carolina side, though, I'm hesitant to say that Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore are going to be the only starters in a game next week against Houston, because they're very good. But I really want to kind of ping on the rest of the team, because Sam Darnold has been very sharp, but Anderson has not really been included in that discussion. He's really a guy we need to see it to believe it, like Brandon Ayuk. Terrace Marshall, I believe, is a drop. Brandon Zystra comes in and scores a touchdown, just twisting knife and already disappointed Anderson managers all fantasy-wide chest. So can I really make the claim that you should be starting Anderson against Houston? I'd like to. I think that's a great matchup for Carolina. But it could be just a situation again where Christian McCaffrey is once again accounting for 40% or more of the total plays that Carolina is even running. So if it's going to be so much McCaffrey, then Moore is very clearly the favorite target from Sam Darnold. Man, it's not very appealing to really be starting any of the rest of the Carolina Panthers. Sam Darnold might be a high-end QB2 in week 3, but that's the best I can say from now without actually doing the rankings. They're up tomorrow on fantasypros.com. Also links through my Twitter at methodical1. You can see it on the screen. But for that point, really not too much else to say for Carolina. We're on to the Denver Broncos and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Denver wins this game 23-13. Jacksonville's bad. Jacksonville's a bad team. Bad team. Starting on the Denver side, Teddy Bridgewater. You can just really pick this team apart at will. Anyone can. It's just a bad team. Also, an injury in this game. Bradley Chubb suffered an ankle injury, was not able to return. Does hurt that Denver Broncos defense a little bit going into that Jets game, but I don't know if that's really going to matter if the Jets are playing that poorly at offense. But Gordon in the backfield outsnaps the two of him, Javonte Williams. Near exact touches, near exact yardage, both low RB2 options, and I think a total snoozer in week 3 versus the New York Jets. But games after that, Pittsburgh and Baltimore after that Jets game, I think that's a bigger testament to what's going to happen in that backfield in tougher game scenarios. But for me, currently, I still lean Melvin Gordon to Williams. It's going to happen at some point. I think it's just not going to happen now. I think it's going to happen if an injury or Gordon starts becoming completely unproductive. Neither were particularly, overly great, but it's just hard to say if the Denver Broncos are really determined to give them both pretty equal workloads. It can go either sort of way for these guys on a week-to-week basis. Moving on, very good breakout game for Courtland Sutton. Was kind of waiting for this after that week 1 sort of stinker, but ADOT of 20.7 through 2 weeks. He's being looked at in big yard situations, and he'll be ranked a little bit more favorably going forward. It's nice to see Noah Fant score a touchdown. It's nice to see Tim Patrick be the preferred option behind Courtland Sutton over KJ Hamler. Draft capital be damned. Patrick possibly going to be a wide receiver 4 option in week 3. It's just going to matter of how much offense is going to be needed in that New York Jets game. I think the running backs and Sutton are for sure plays. It's going to be in Fant because he's a tight end. But Tim Patrick, not a must start, but possibly a good start against New York Jets in week 3. Jacksonville side. Oh, man, this team sucks. That's a way to describe this team. This team sucks. The only player I really want to start right now is Marvin Jones. Chenault's a little banged up. DJ Chark is not getting work. James Robinson is possibly just matchup dependent. It's just he's getting half the work he did last year. To start 2020, 32 carries, 164 yards, 4 receptions, 46 receiving yards, and a score through the first 2 weeks of 2020. 2021 season, 16 carries, 72 yards, 6 receptions, 46 yards, no touchdowns. He was a low. I don't even think he was actually. I don't think he was a low RB2. I think he was an RB3 for me in this matchup. And man, I just cannot with this team. They're a bad team. I don't like the statement they came out and made as well. That they know they're bad and they're going to try and right the ship and just stick with them. They play the Arizona Cardinals this week, and Arizona might be favored by like 16. I'm just really worried to see what that spread is. I don't know what it is just yet. But we had some 12-point spreads this week. That game, I don't know. Kyler Murray is going to do just crazy things. Do not play against Kyler Murray in week 3. You're going to lose. That's all I can say. Just this is a bad football team. Moving on. Vegas versus Pittsburgh. Las Vegas actually wins this game 26-17. Pittsburgh usually better at home, but Vegas has had good starts before. This 2-0 start for Vegas has not been something too crazy over these last 2 seasons. A 6-3 start and a 6-4 start over the last 2 years have turned into an 8-8 and 7-9 finish. So we've kind of seen this before. So Derek Carr, though, he played excellent, I thought, in this game. Banged up late. Gruden says he will play next week against Miami, so that's good to see. And Gruden wasn't lying about saying Peyton Barber will be involved. 32 rushing yards for Barber, leads the backfield in rushing yards and rushing carries. Doesn't mean it got fantasy points because that's all he got. But Kenyon Drake does have a tough matchup here, so not particularly something that was going to be pushing the envelope too much. But 5 for 46 performance through the air does kind of salvage his day somewhat. Was an RB3, possibly a low end RB2 option again for me. For Fantasy Pros, as soon as the week kind of rolls over, I have to go through measures to kind of see my own rankings, and I'm kind of lazy and I don't want to do that. But another touchdown thief in this one. It's Foster Moreau scores a touchdown. That's great. But we did get a big touchdown of Henry Ruggs. I did push these guys up. I thought a little bit banged up on the Pittsburgh Steelers secondary right before kickoff. Brian Edwards and Henry Ruggs moved up my ranks a little bit. Darren Waller has a fine performance for his position. Wasn't the 19 total touches like you saw in week 1, one of the highest targeted players in the NFL, if not the highest targeted player in the NFL. But Waller still a top 3 option going forward. And Ruggs and Edwards, if they start seeing good production and good sort of target work, then I'm pretty hopeful for this team being a better offense than I've kind of given them credit for. I still don't really want to be involved with the running backs, but the receiving game I am interested. I am interested in for sure. Pittsburgh. One big thing was going to be a bounce back from Najee Harris. Well, he scored. That's good. Deonte Johnson. He's very much a lock for double-digit targets every week. He did that again. These are good things. Oh, and Juju Smith-Schuster scored. Cool. These are all nice things for us in fantasy. But Deonte Johnson got hurt on the last play of the game, and they're kind of mum about it. And it seems optimistic that he's not going to be having anything severe past, what looked like a meaningless play, getting his knee injured. It's going to be still Deonte Johnson, then Juju, then Claypool, if all things are right and considered for him. I still don't think Ben Roethlisberger has looked particularly sharp through 2 games. Still just a middling quarterback 2, not really in our top 12 discussions with no games on buys. But I'm still looking for Pittsburgh to really have that big offensive performance, and it has not shown up through 2 weeks. Looking for better things in the future. Atlanta versus Tampa Bay. Now we get into the 4 o'clock games. We get into some good stuff because all these 1 o'clock games sucked and I hated them. But Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Tampa wins 48-25, so they cover that 12.5 point spread. Good for them. But starting with the Atlanta side, type of game that needs to happen versus Tampa Bay for sure, because you had Calvin Ridley, you had Kyle Pitts bouncing back in different ways, but this is the way you're going to have to be attacking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because they're not going to allow you to really just run on them kind of at all. But those guys, we're going to be starting them every single week. The two names I really want to talk about, because there have been some contention about being a waiver wire pickup. And I just want to, now I do want to say I have been a Mike Davis guy all off season. So there's some sort of inclination with that. But I do want to say I just said I was wrong on the Robert Woods to Cooper Kupp thing. So it's not like I can go against players I do like. But here, when running back snaps and touches, lean Davis's way, and you have him in tough matchups against Philadelphia and Tampa Bay, but you have Cordero pass and score 2 touchdowns. This is the guy I'm worried about. Mitchell last week with too much fab being spent on him. Patterson this week with too much fab being spent on him. I know touchdowns are king. The one good thing for him, and I totally copped to us, he was ended up with the play resulting the ball in his hands on 50% of his total snaps. So that's something I do like seeing. If he's involved in the game, if he's in the game, he's involved in the game. I like that quite a bit. But Davis is still the lead option out of this backfield. Now, if Patterson becomes more of a receiver with Davis also on the field, that's one thing, because Russell Gage did leave this game with an ankle injury and did not return. But just be very cautious with how much fab you're going to spend on Patterson. 15%. 20% might be the limit, but that's what I said for Elijah Mitchell, and that's for sure the starting running back. So maybe like 10%, if that. I'm very much concerned that we're just looking too much about what happened with the overall fantasy production, which is the touchdowns, and a lot of people were talking about Patterson, and I'm just worried that this is too much hype on a guy. When you saw Davis have 7 targets, caught all 7 balls, you saw him lead the way on the ground game for 9 carries for 38 yards in a game where you didn't want them running anyway, and they couldn't because of the game script. Just be very cautious. Don't spend 50% of your fab on Patterson. That sounds like a regret. He's a fancy gadget player. He's been able to do things. He's very athletic. If he can be involved in other ways, cool. But I don't think it just means Patterson's now taking over this backfield. It feels like the same thing we're saying Gallman was going to take over this backfield, was inactive again for the NFL Falcons. If it's just pretty much Davis and Patterson, that's one thing. But don't get too ahead of yourself on Patterson for sure. That's just my 2 cents about it. Buccaneers side of the ball. Few things. Brady's a top 5 quarterback option until first notice. This offense has been on fire since that week 12 bye in 2020. All 3 receivers are going to be top 24 options. You're just hoping it leans your way. They're going to be a very frustrating team to rank. But Antonio Brown, after the big week 1 game, kind of disappears. Chris Godwin does come down to score, but it was Mike Evans' week this week, and Mike Evans could go back to being completely non-existent next week against the LA Rams. All to be seen how it all kind of plays out, but they're going to be ranked on the top 24, and man, it's just kind of going to be annoying for them. It's going to be who's going to be coming down the scores. Robert Gronkowski has a top 12 option. He's going to stay that way until Gronk, the wheels kind of come off. But right now, with him being still healthy and fired up, everything going the way they want it to, leads the league in scoring right now with 4 touchdowns. A few players with 3, but him at 4, he is the leading guy right now. So top 12 option, we pushed up a little bit higher. He'd probably be, time 6, 7, 8. Who's to really say, because matchups depend. But I think in a very, very fun looking game next week against the Rams, I think Robert Gronkowski is going to be pretty good lock to be in my top 12 and pretty highly in my top 12. The running backs. One big thing on the running backs was who is the starting running back, because they said all of them were going to be. Currently, Leonard Fournette, in terms of touches, in terms of snaps, he is their lead back, and he's going to be the only top 30 option of the 3. Now, can Ronald Jones come out and be the starter? And this and that and the other thing, of course, I really hate that we've kind of been jerked around with this guy for 3 years. Right now, it's Fournette in the top 30. Giovanni Bernard has around like 10 snaps in this game total, very lightly involved. It's Leonard Fournette's job to lose at the moment, and I have almost no confidence when I say that. It's very likely it can just go Ronald Jones's way because Bruce Arians doesn't care about your fantasy team. Moving on to what I thought was going to be the second best fantasy game of the week, and it turned out to be probably the fantasy game of the week. It was a very exciting Minnesota-Arizona game. Arizona just really pulls one out with a missed field goal right at the end of the game by Minnesota to win 34-33, starting on the Minnesota side. The one big thing was KJ Osborne with 9 targets and heavy snap count in week 1. Is he going to be more than just a flex play? I ended up being the highest ranker on him on Fantasy Pros for some reason. Cool, because he's not a fluke. He needs to be rostered. Schedule coming up: Seattle, Cleveland, Detroit, Carolina, and Dallas. He's going to be a flex option. He's going to be a guy we're going to be looking at as a top 40 receiver, along with both Jefferson and Thielen coming through in this game as well. This was a good Minnesota offensive production sort of game. Dalvin Cook was banged up late in this game. He did come in for the final drive, so that's good news for us. If you want to go pick up Alexander Madison because you're a little bit scared about what happened with him, if you're a Dalvin Cook manager, that is completely fine. But I'm not saying you should go out and roster Alexander Madison with 30% FAB or anything crazy like that. Dalvin Cook currently has no lingering issues going into week 3. Over to the Arizona side. My one big thing was the Cardinals defense, but only got to Kirk Cousins once and no interceptions in this very wild game. So it's still to be determined how good they are. I think they have a good amount of defensive talent on that side of the ball, but the big story is undoubtedly Kyle Murray. He is the greatest form of the rushing quarterback right now because just like Lamar Jackson, where he can use his legs to run over the field and do amazing things, the ability to extend plays, the ability to be unable to be taken down in the backfield, get out of sacks, extend and produce. There's like 2 or 3 plays in that game where it's like, wow, I don't know how many quarterbacks in the NFL can be doing the things he's doing. He is breaking the NFL. It's really just a matter of what's his ceiling, how much can he really produce. If he's going to be running, if he's going to be moving the ball like this, there's really just a handful of guys you can say are going to be even in his class. They got Jacksonville this week, and I said before, this might be like a 16-point spread. Arizona, it's just going to be a matter of if they want Kyler Murray to do all the fantastic things, because that game could get really, really ugly really quick, especially if that defense goes back to the big sack totals they had in week 1 against Tennessee. Very disgusting game upcoming with that Arizona-Jacksonville game. We're on to this backfield. James Conner is almost droppable because he's not really being accounted for in this offense. Now, throughout the preseason, I always said my preferred option of the 2 on a points per game basis was Chase Edmonds. It was going to be a matter of Conner getting enough rushing workload and receiving, that if he was going to be involved enough to be a solid enough option as well to be involved alongside Edmonds. Currently, that's not particularly something we want to be looking at with James Conner. And Edmonds is being overshadowed a little bit as well. Now, again, this was a very wild game between Hopkins, Rondell Moore at some broken plays, Max Williams for some reason. If you even know who that is, he's the tight end. He's seen like 7 total targets over 2 seasons. It's more than that. But Max Williams is not really a player that's supposed to go out for 7 for 94. This was a very fun, very fantastic sort of fantasy points game. But I still think there's not really, on a weekly basis, I think it feels like if you have an Arizona Cardinals receiver outside of DeAndre Hopkins and you'd like to play them as a flex option, that's fine. But am I particularly going to be loving the confidence that I have with those players? That's going to be a completely different situation. So right now, Hopkins for sure locked in top 5 no matter what. The rest of the guys, it could easily be Christian Kirk next week. It could easily be Rondell Moore, AJ Green. We don't particularly know, and that's going to be a little bit of a problem for us with consistency. Again, that Jacksonville game might be over by the second quarter. Who knows even know if Kyler Murray is going to be needed in the second half, because that could just get really gross really quickly. Moving on to the Dallas LA Chargers game. This was a game that I wanted to be the game of the week. And 175 total penalty yards. It's kind of the long and the short of this game. The NFL refs, I almost cursed, really messed this one up. But starting with the Dallas side, my one big thing going to the game was without Michael Gallup, was it going to be Dalton Schultz, Cedric Wilson? It looks like Tony Pollard is actually the player that we have to look at as being another option in this Dallas offense. He stepped up, playing alongside Elliott, outshining him in total points on the season. It's going to be a matter of there's really not too much, unfortunately, to talk about, because his offense did really not produce well enough for me to say there's too many talking points. And there's an offense that I'm pretty excited for going forward. But Pollard needs to be looked at as a flex option at the very least. He's, like I said, he's outscoring. I saw in full PPR, he's outscoring Ezekiel at RB9 to RB25 on this season, and Elliott was very seldomly used in that week 1 game by design anyway. But other than that, Amari Cooper, apparently his ribs were a little bruised. He's apparently fine for the next game. I'm just sad about this one. This was a game I really wanted to have that big point total like that Arizona game had, like that Tampa Bay game had. This ending in a 20-17 score really is a disappointment for me. Wasn't a disappointment, though, on the LA Chargers side. One big thing was Austin Eckler going to see targets? Well, he saw 9 of them, and he caught all 9 of them. Good. That's what we want. Yay. But my 2 starts of the week were Mike Williams at receiver and Jared Cook at tight end. Cook was kind of a bust at tight end. He still might end up as a top 12 because tight end is terrible. But Mike Williams needs to be talked about as a top 24 receiver. He's being pre-relied on outside of just long balls. That's what he's been really looked at in the past, where he was just a deep option for the Chargers and solely looked at it. He's no longer this, 15 yards or more downfield guy. This is a guy near, the first down marker alongside Keenan Allen. That's kind of been hurting Keenan Allen a little bit. He does have 100 yards in this game, but Mike Williams has a better fantasy day. Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, start them all the time alongside Justin Herbert. Again, very disappointed how this game actually played out. Had both quarterbacks as top 5 options, had multiple guys in the top 10. This is a disappointment, but a lot of people saw this as the game of the week. I know the CBS Sports, they had their little bonanza sort of curse for it. But say Levy. Few games left out, 2 actually. So let's try and finish this up strong as my voice starts to falter. Tennessee versus Seattle. Tennessee wins this game 33-30. One big thing was hopefully that we had a little bit of a bounce back from the Tennessee side of the ball. Well, 3/4 of this team bounced back. And we'll talk about who didn't and really we shouldn't be worrying. But we got to talk about Derrick Henry, right? Near 50 points. In full PPR, single-handedly won people some weeks, just dominated in the second half of this game, outscoring the Seattle Seahawks 21-6 after halftime. There's a few things like we need to talk about more, though, in depth with him. So currently, the amount of running backs in the league, or really just players in general, who have 30 carries and 10 or more targets. Christian McCaffrey, that makes sense. Dalvin Cook, that makes sense. And Derrick Henry. Those are the only 3 players who currently do. So they does see 7 targets in this game. This was a career receiving day for Derrick Henry, and the 182 yards on the ground that he had. These are good things. I'm not going to say it's a good thing. But I'm going to say a little bit about why a 41 touch day is not a particularly good thing for Derrick Henry. The amount of players who have been able to have 400 touch seasons and be successful the year after those years have really been just in the last 20 years. There have really been 2 guys. It's been LaDainian Tomlinson and it's been Steven Jackson. Steven Jackson had that crazy 1,000 season. LaDainian Tomlinson, one of the best fantasy players of all time. He had like 6 straight years, like 375 touches or more. He was kind of used to it. And he just didn't matter with him. He was just able to produce at such ridiculous numbers. Derrick Henry is going to be 28. One of the oldest players in the first round. Him, Devontae Adams is going to be a little bit up there. Travis Kelce is going to be 32. I'm worried about Tennessee putting too much of their offense on him. Now, is he a physical just freak? Sure, he is just an absolute beast of a human being. But 41 touches, that is just a lot. That's a lot. And we knew they weren't going to keep Henry down all year after the bad week 1 against Arizona. But they had the ball for 42 minutes in this game. And it's a little bit to talk about with Seattle when we get to them, because there's some things I'm worried about with Seattle in their offense as well. But Derrick Henry, just as soon as Darrington Evans is off the PUP or IR, whatever he's on right now, I think he's a pickup. I think he's a consideration. You need to be looking at him. I'm not saying that Derrick Henry is going to get hurt. I'm just saying there is the worry with a player who's getting just such a monstrous workload that we've just seen not be successful in the past from other players. Not exactly the same physical makeup, but it's just something to really be looked at, as that's not particularly something I want to see from a player at age 27, 28. We're not to the receivers, though. That was an absolute crime that Julio Jones' touchdown was turned over. I don't know what they were looking at. Everyone didn't know what they were looking at. That was a bad call. NFL refs, I don't know what they're doing. But he was good. He was great, actually. But we got to talk about A.J. Brown. 17 targets over the first 2 weeks, sixth in the NFL, trailing only Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Brandon Cook, Stephon Diggs, and Braxton Berrios for some reason. So we know all that. We know that now. Only players with more targets than A.J. Brown. Do not get worried about him. Do not trade him away at the lowest point you can. This is a player I have high hopes for being a great, excellent player. Again, this is a team that I think is going to be very hard to cover when all three players are operating at 100%. This is the bounce back I wanted. More touches went Henry's way than I really liked just in terms of the health standpoint. That's all I got to talk about Tennessee, because we got to talk about Seattle. My one big thing is I want to see more sustained drives out of them. I want to see less of them relying on very lucky sort of big plays occurring. These are by drives and the results for the Seattle Seahawks from the first drive of the game. 3-and-out, 5-play field goal result, 9-play punt, 3-play touchdown that was off a fumble that started on the Tennessee 6, 7-play touchdown, 8-play punt. The 5-play field goal was actually a Lockett big play that occurred early in the game. That's why they were able to do so. 8-point punt, 3-play touchdown with the Swain score from 6 to 8 yards out. 3-and-out, 4-play end of the half. That was end of game. It went to the overtime, and then 3-and-out in overtime. Little worry that Seattle's getting just a little bit lucky, and it's not very been talked about that big plays like this occurring are a overly good thing. Overly bad thing. Seattle right now to me is one of the process has been bad, but the results have been good. So I'm a little worried about Lockett one day not having those crazy plays to make him a great fantasy asset. I prefer Metcalf to Lockett in season long. I don't think many people would say that right now. But I am worried about Seattle. I am worried that this is not a sustainable way to play football. So I'm just going to go on record saying that. Last game of the night, Kansas City versus Baltimore, as that Green Bay Packer game is about to kick off. So I want to go and watch this. So let's wrap this up quick. Starting with Kansas City, we have to talk about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. My one big thing going in was Clyde Edwards-Helaire a matchup-dependent running back, and it appears to be so because he's not involved in this offense that he's just been relegated to a level of the other Chiefs where if they score, great. I see a lot of people comparing him to like Devin Singletary and other just plotter sort of backs, Trent Richardson. He's nothing more than just a flex running back at the moment. This is a bad spot. It's a very bad spot for him because even though Tyreek Hill does not have a very good fantasy day, with Marcus Robinson and Byron Pringle scoring, it's really the big three, and it's a big three only for Kansas City until I see more out of Clyde. He's not involved enough through the passing game where Mahomes and all them are. That is their directive. It's Mahomes winning them football games, and he's very good at doing so. That's why they're back-to-back AFC champions. It's because Mahomes and that passing offense is lethal. Travis Kelce breaking 17 tackles on the way to the end zone. Tyreek Hill, when he does have his big games like he did in week 1 for almost 200 yards, those are how they win games. It's those three guys. Currently, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not one of those three guys. Over on the Baltimore side, it was going to be one big thing. Do we get consistency in any sort of regard? I do think we saw that out of the one receiver in particular, but the running back situation, I'm still a little hesitant to say that exactly it's leaning one way or another. Tyson Williams was the better of the two running backs, does fumble in the game, goes right into Devin Duvernay's hands for a score, the goal line. Latavius Murray does score later in this game. I'd like to say I'm going to lean Tyson Williams as the top 30-something back of the two, but I can't really be too confident in that because the only real must-starts are still going to be Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews at their positions. Marquis Brown, though, I hoped that this was going to be a big springboard game for him, and he ended up being probably at the end of the week, top 20, if not higher score at receiver. I liked him as a top 36 or on the cusp of 36 option, but he will be ranked in my top 36 for sure going forward. He has had a very excellent streak of games dating back to 2020. I am all about him because Sammy Watkins just had week 1 Watkins, and we don't have to no longer have to talk about him. All right. So as my voice is almost gone for the day, so we're going to be back here. I got a real quick question, though, in the chat. How would you rank the following 5 teams' offense are watching 2 weeks? Tennessee, Baltimore, Cleveland, Seattle, Arizona. Arizona undeniably won. Seattle, I believe, has been getting very lucky, so I wouldn't want to hesitate on them. Cleveland, I've not thought of as I thought they should have really handled Houston a little bit more, so I'm a little disappointed about them in their own regard. I'm going to go with which I thought is how it would play out a little bit closer to I'm going to go Arizona. I think Tennessee should be one of the hardest teams to cover in the NFL, so I'm going with them as 2. I'm going to lean Baltimore, and then Seattle, Cleveland. Those are all good offenses, though, in one regard or another. And the second question, Patterson or Latavius, in your opinion? I'm going to assume that's Cordero Patterson. I'm still going to be leaning Latavius Murray. I know Cordero Patterson is going to be the big fab pickup. Touchdowns are king in all that regard, but we still saw him get out-snapped and out-touched by Mike Davis in a situation where I thought Mike Davis was going to be in for a tough game whatsoever. So 23 touches and getting 23 snaps and like around 11 touches for Cordero Patterson on those. I think it's going to be a fluky thing. It's nice if he gets more involved because of Russell Gage being out. That's one thing, but I think there's a little bit of a worry that we're going to be spending too much fab on Patterson, like everyone just spent too much fab on Elijah Mitchell. So with that, I'm going to be wrapping up as I go. We're about to go watch that Green Bay Detroit game. And with that, I'll be back here on Wednesday. We'll be previewing. We got all the 1 p.m. and reviewing this game. We'll be previewing all the 1 p.m. and the Thursday night football games. We'll be back here on Friday as well, all at 7:30. And with that, also check out, we got the slate on Saturdays. We got Game Defensive with Gary and the crew on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and John and myself on Wednesdays at 5:30. So always, like I said, it's a doubleheader on Wednesdays for me at 5:30 and 7:30 here on the Gridiron Ratings channel. So with that, I am the senior redraft analyst for GridironRatings.com, Matthew McCarthy, and I'll be seeing you guys on Wednesday. And it was the first time, the last time you spent your time with me. I appreciate you for that. And good luck if you have any players left in this Monday night football game.